Welcome to Josh's Cemetery Chats. What's up, Bearheart Nation? How's it going out there? So apologies for, I'm sure I have a little bit of hay on me. We're getting set up here, and Fred's not helpful at all. So I had to carry all the hay bales over. My wife was here helping me, but she's sitting in the car right now trying to hide from the cold. But I wanted to talk today about something that's been kind of on my mind a little bit lately for a reason that I'll get to later on in the video. And that is how stories, whether it's in a book or a movie or a TV show, really affect us and give us kind of an escape from the real world. Because especially lately, it feels like the world's falling apart. And using books and TV and movies have been a way that millions of people have used to escape from real world problems. Books are one of my favorite mediums, though, because in a book, anything can happen. It's not like a movie or a television show where they're kind of constrained by the effects of the time or the technology that's available. In a book, it's words on the page that can paint and it can draw an entirely new world, and it can create something that no movie or television show could ever replicate. And a lot of that has to do with how you see it in your mind as you're playing through the story. And a lot of this can be seen, especially in the book to movie adaptations that we've seen, especially the past like 20 or 30 years, where there's just been this big push for these popular books that they become really popular as a book series, and somebody in Hollywood that either loved the series and wanted to make something of it, or somebody who just wanted to make some money, saw the potential to exploit fans, they decided to make a movie out of it. And we've seen this with things like the Lord of the Rings series, Harry Potter, the Hunger Games, the Divergent series. A lot of those being young adult novels, they get translated into movies, and a lot of times you wind up with backlash over those book to movie adaptations for one of several reasons. But typically the most common reason is that the fans of the book, the people who loved the book, see the movie and it's not what they imagined it would be. And a lot of times that's because every single one of us, when we're reading through a book, we will interpret the book differently. We'll interpret the scenes, what the characters look like a lot of times, depending on the description of the characters. And we'll kind of build up in our heads our own version of the world. And when somebody else comes in and creates their version of the world in a way that you can visually see it, if it doesn't match up with how you imagined it should be, that can be really disheartening and really upsetting, especially if you have built this world up and it's been something that you've really loved for a long period of time. For instance, with the Harry Potter series. So the Harry Potter books actually started coming out in 2001, at which time I was already in my teens, and while it was technically aimed at me, it wasn't something that I was overly excited about. But on top of that, my mom was really religious at the time, and she was under the influence of the Christian view of Harry Potter's evil because it includes wizards. And so of course I was like, oh, well, this must be a bad book to read. I shouldn't read it. And so for years I had that thought. Well, when the movies came out, I decided I'm going to go check out the movies because, you know, everybody's excited about this. Everybody's been talking about it. I kind of want to see what this is all about. And I loved the movies. Every single movie I was watching, and I was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. This is amazing. And it got to the point where, like, I heard a lot of people complaining about the movies and saying how the movies weren't true to the books, and they were really disappointed in what they saw. And I didn't really understand it until I went back and read the books. Now, when I say read the books, I actually listened to them on Audible. So I listened to the Harry Potter series, all of the books, and then I went back and tried to watch the movies, and I found it very difficult to watch the movies after reading the books because of the detail that was in the books. And that's what really got me kind of more interested in the idea of the books being better than the movies, and kind of trying to figure out, like, okay, what adaptations have been done, and maybe I can read some other books and watch the movies and see what the differences are. I did the same thing with Lord of the Rings, and I actually read those books on Audible as well and watched the movies. I've got the extended editions of all the movies and I love them, but the books were better because they included more detail and they allowed me to kind of build the world up in my mind. Now, having seen the movie before reading the book, a lot of the time those two worlds become a little more intertwined, where I'm imagining the characters from the movies actually in the books when I'm reading through them, just because I'm already familiar with those. So I think in that instance it kind of takes away the ability to form the full picture in my mind, which is why I still enjoy the Harry Potter movies. I still enjoy the Lord of the Rings movies, even though I've read the books as well, because I already had the movies in my head when I read the books. So those characters, those places, those kind of things were already built for me by somebody else. So other than just reading books, I've always been fascinated with the idea of writing my own story, writing my own book. I used to love those assignments when I was in middle school, especially middle school and even in high school when we got creative writing assignments, because I love to sit down and come up with my own ideas and my own world and build up some characters. And when I first started writing in middle school, the first real attempt at a story that I ever had, and I don't have it anymore and I wish I did, but I'd written it down and it probably took up 30 or 40 pages of this big notepad that I had. And the concept of the story had to do with monsters coming down. They were kind of like space alien monsters who came down and were taking over Earth slowly. And there was, the story was following a lone group of survivors. And it was a fun story to me, but I read it years later when I was a lot older, and I was like, man, this is terrible. But it was an early attempt at writing. It was because I was a teenager. I didn't have a lot of experience with the world, and I was writing based on my experience. And that's been something that I've done every single time that I've attempted to do any kind of creative writing or coming up with stories, using my own personal experience to kind of build on from my stories. And so as I get older, that personal experience grows and I have more things to kind of feed off of when I'm writing. Because I loved writing and creating things so much when I was a kid, as I grew older, I still had that inside me. I wanted to create, I wanted to do something special. And I tried many different attempts at it, and through the years, I've done everything from I tried to make a video game to the point where I was learning how to 3D model and learning how to code in Unity and all that kind of stuff. I got a couple of pretty okay things out of it, but it was nothing near where it's nothing that I would have ever paid to play or charged anybody to play. It was just kind of a fun process and experiment, but it was something where I was in way over my head, because I was coming at it from a creative standpoint, and from that creative standpoint I was having to relearn, or not relearn, but learn all of these different things that I would have to do in order to make this all come together. Within the past couple of years, I started picking up photography as a way of kind of expressing myself creatively, and because it's a lot of fun to take pictures and kind of see what you can do with that. But I still wanted a little bit more, because I have all of these ideas in my head and I have these creative, I will lay in bed at night some nights and just build entire worlds and entire stories in my head. It causes me to not be able to sleep at times because I'm just so into whatever world I'm envisioning. And so I needed a way to kind of express some of that creativity and get it out there. So after starting my YouTube channel and kind of getting into it with the photography thing, I started looking at, what else can I do? How can I get these stories that I want to tell out? And one of the genres that I had fallen in love with over the years as far as storytelling was something called ARGs, which is an alternate reality game. And typically these are stories that people are trying to tell. A lot of times they have game elements to them where you have to solve puzzles, you have to unravel mysteries, and usually it's the creator has some kind of a story to tell, and they're telling it through this version of the medium. The people that are watching are actually interacting with it as well. And I got really into the idea of, I want to make one of these. I want to put together an ARG and have people solve it, and it's going to be so much fun. And I tried putting stuff together to make something happen, but it never really took off. And a lot of that lays on the way that I did it was just terrible. The way that I was trying to do it just wasn't working. And then I decided when the ARG stuff wasn't really doing what I wanted it to do, I was going to go ahead and just kind of make my own video series. I had a YouTube channel after all, so why not try to just film something creatively on my own? One of the problems with that is that it was pretty much me. I was coming up with the story, going out to locations, filming, editing. I was playing every single role. My wife was helping me out where she could, but there's only so much that she could realistically do because, I'm doing everything. I'm writer, director, editor, actor, just everything. And it really wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. The episodes were coming out good. I got 3 episodes complete, and it was kind of moving the story along, but it really wasn't doing what I was wanting to do. And then stuff happened over the spring, and I wound up having some difficulty and not being able to complete what I wanted to do with it. And then the summer came along, I got laid off, and things just weren't working out well. So I started to kind of retool and rethink, how do I do this? What do I really want to do? Because I've got this story, I need to express this, I need to get this out. So I finally came up with something that is working, and I'm really enjoying it, and it's something that's not going to be overburdensome. It's something that I can actually complete. So if you came from my other channel, or if you've seen some of the videos over there, you may or may not have noticed at one point where in a lot of the descriptions I was writing a story out. And I was starting that story off just telling it piece by piece in different descriptions of different videos. And then I was going and posting it on Patreon as kind of like, here's the full chapter when it's complete. And that was okay, but it really wasn't kind of getting where I wanted to get with it, because writing stuff in YouTube descriptions, it doesn't really get it out there. And when you put on Patreon, it's cool, but not everybody wants to go visit Patreon, and it doesn't really work out the way that you want it to work out. So over the summer, as I was building my website, I had this idea in the back of my mind of maybe adding something into my website where I could actually just kind of express and put the story out there in a way that people could actually partake and read it, but I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. And then I decided a couple of weeks ago to add in something of a behind the scenes, kind of like an in-depth deep dive into some of the things that I think about, almost like a blog, but not really. And then I decided I'm going to go ahead and add in the story, but I'm going to release it one chapter at a time. And in the moment, I didn't really think about it, but after looking it up, I realized that this is something that's been kind of a thing for a long time. So a lot of older stories, a lot of really long stories like War and Peace were released in what is known as a serialized fashion. So essentially, it's like a television show where every week or month or a couple times a week there would be a new episode, which would be basically a new chapter or a new part of a chapter in the overall story. And then that would happen until the entire thing was released, and then it would all be bound into one big novel and released to be purchased as one big, so you could read all of the story at the same time. And I didn't realize when I was setting all of this up that that's what I was doing, but now I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool actually. Now there are sites out there like Amazon and other sites that will allow authors to upload serialized fiction in a way that people can basically buy tokens. You can usually read the first 3 chapters, or first couple of chapters at least, for free, and then to read the rest of the story you have to buy tokens, and then the author gets a part of those tokens. They get a percentage. Usually, I think on Amazon it's like a 50-50 split. Some websites are like 70-30, but it's something out there that authors can do as a way to get their stuff out there. It's a good way to get a novel out there without having to actually write the entire novel and wait until the end of the novel to put the whole thing out there. Now that can be a little bit risky if you are a consumer of that fiction, if you're reading the story, because if you wind up in a situation where the author doesn't finish it for one reason or another, you're at a loss for the fact that you spent money on each of the chapters, but you've also kind of invested yourself in the story, especially if it's further along, and now you don't get to hear a good ending. But the thing about it is it's very similar to the way that television shows run. It's very similar to the way that a lot of games nowadays, especially indie games, but even bigger titles, come out in a partially finished state. And you wind up paying to play the game that isn't completely finished, hoping that the devs finish it, and it doesn't always happen. Movies haven't quite got there yet, although it's kind of like that a little bit with the way that Disney's doing the Marvel Cinematic Universe now, because a lot of their shows they have, like WandaVision, yeah, they're episodes, but it's kind of like watching an entire movie over the course of several episodes. So it's very similar to that. But from an author standpoint, the serialized fiction actually is a great idea, because for one thing, it lets you know early on whether or not people are going to enjoy the work. And it lets those people help to fund the work as you go along. So very similar to if you're making videos on YouTube and you're only doing it part-time, and then you have a video take off and explode, and the next thing you know, like, you're making money and you can actually do it full-time, and now you can make more videos and you can devote more time to it. It's the same thing with a serialized novel. As an author, you start out and you're making maybe a chapter a week or a chapter every couple of weeks, as often as you can get them out. And then as it picks up and people start to find it, you find out that people really love it. And that not only motivates you to kind of move forward and continue writing, but it also gives you the funding that might help you to write more often, to maybe be able to focus on it more often, as opposed to focusing on a full-time job, because a lot of authors have full-time jobs and they just kind of write on the side. So it's an amazing tool that authors can use, and it kind of hypes people up too, because, and I know even back in the olden days with Charles Dickens and people like that would publish serialized novels, the novel would be going along as people are reading it and they're getting more and more invested in it. By the time it finishes, everybody's kind of ready, they're amped up, they want to see what the ending is going to be, and then they're hurrying out to buy the book because they want to be able to own the entire thing all at once and maybe sit down and reread it, because sometimes you wind up with things where maybe you missed something in earlier chapters, it made sense later. So it's one of those things that, like, I think from just an overall perspective, it's a solid plus for authors, for readers, because it follows the same format that we're used to for a lot of other things. Plus, from a reader's standpoint, if you're reading a serialized novel, you're not necessarily invested in the whole thing, and maybe you can read the first couple of chapters and decide whether or not you really like it enough to continue before you pay anything, and then you only pay a small amount. That small amount adds up, and you can wind up paying as much for the overall completed novel or more by the time all is said and done, depending on the service you go through, than you would have paid if you just would have bought it outright. So now that I've expanded on that, I'm going to come back to actually talking about my novel because this is something that I'm very passionate about. It's something that I've been working on for a while now. It's more than a year in the making that this has been building up, and I've finally got the medium that I think is going to be the right medium for it, because it allows me to tell a story and build a world without having to worry about the technical restrictions and monetary restrictions that I currently have. Because let's face it, when I'm the only actor in the entire thing and there's multiple actors needed, when I have as good as my Sony ZV-1 camera is, there are cinematic cameras out there that are much, much better. And I understand there's low budget films and there's a lot of people that make great low budget films, but I don't have the expertise, the technical know-how, or the social circle, the people that I know that would be able to assist with something like that, because it's not something that you typically do on your own. There's a lot of people that will make short films on their own, because when you're making a short film and it's only a few minutes long, it's something that is much more doable even with a solo actor. But when you want to make something that's a little bit bigger and a little bit broader, it makes it a lot more difficult, especially when you have to scout locations and get permission to film in certain places. And maybe someday I'll get around to being able to actually film the story that I want to film in the way I want to film it, but I can start by telling it as a book and telling it in a serialized novel that will allow me to release 1 or 2 chapters a week and get that out there, so that maybe people will find it and read it and enjoy it and want more. Now, the way I have it set up on the website is there's a couple of different ways that you can get access to the story. The one, like I mentioned earlier on, is kind of tied to Patreon. It's $29.99 a month for a ton of access, all of the Patreon benefits basically, plus some extra stuff. And the way that I have that set up is I've got a $30 tier on Patreon as well as a $55 tier. And anybody in those tiers, you get free access. If you want to read the story, I currently have it on there listed for $9.99. Now that $9.99 is for the story. It's not just for a few chapters. I'm not doing it in the same sense that Amazon does it, or other kind of serialized novel outlets where you buy tokens or you buy a chapter at a time. I've got it set up to where it's $9.99 for everything, for what I've got on there, plus what's going to be coming out in the next few weeks. Now, that being said, the first chapter is currently available for free as a preview chapter, so anybody can read it for free. You can go in, you can kind of get a feel for the writing style and kind of what to expect with the story moving forward. The first chapter is a good representation of what the rest of the book has to offer. In the next couple of weeks, I think I'm going to probably add the second and third chapters to that free preview, just so that if anybody wants to kind of get a better view, an overall idea of like the arc and what's going on in the story, those first 3 chapters will be available for everybody. But I want to get a couple more chapters out before I do that. But I also want to do something a little bit special for anybody that has watched through to this point in the video and is interested in reading the story. I'm going to put an offer code, and I'll put it up on the screen here, and I'll put it down in the description below so that everybody can see it. Now, that offer code will be good for the first 10 people that use it. And so basically, you'll go to the site and you'll go and you'll click on the package that includes just the journal, which is the title of the story, and it's $9.99. And once you get to the checkout screen, you'll put the promo code, the offer code in, and it will give you access for free. And that access will be from now until the end of time. You will have access to the entirety of that book for free. But it's only for the first 10 people. So if it sounds like something you'd like to check out, you've got nothing to lose. You sign up, you check it out, you can read through the story, and if you really enjoy it, all I would ask is that you would share it and let other people know about it. I want to make sure that I shout out the names up on the screen, because they've been there through thick and thin. That's the patrons that have been there for a while now, who are there to support me, and I can't say thank you enough to those people. If you would like to have your name up on the screen, you can head over to Patreon. The lowest tier gets you in, so $3 a month, and you get a really cool format. I've been trying to format the names and add some different fonts and some cool little stuff to them, just because I find it boring to just read the names when there's like 20 to 30 names that are all just in plain text just sitting on the screen. That's boring. I want to spice it up a little bit. So if you want to get your name on the screen and something like that, go over and check out the Patreon. I think that's all I got for now. I want to thank you all for watching. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.